She walked into the wedding hall long before any of the guests arrived. The sun was barely up, the air outside still cool, and the building smelled of fresh flowers and polished floors. She tightened the apron around her waist and tied her hair back, as she always did for work. It was going to be a long day, but she didn't mind. Weddings meant good tips, and she needed every extra bit she could save. Rent, food, and helping her mother with bills didn't leave much room for comfort, but she had gotten used to that. What mattered was that she kept going. The hall looked beautiful that morning. Rows of white tables were lined with gold plates and tall candles. Soft music played from the speakers as the staff hurried around, checking every little detail. She worked quietly, polishing glasses and arranging napkins. Most of the staff knew each other well, but she wasn't the type to join in every conversation. She was polite and friendly, but she kept her thoughts to herself. People often mistook her quietness for shyness. Others thought she was simply tired from long hours. No one knew much about her, and she preferred it that way. On the far side of the room stood a large black piano. It was polished so well that the lights reflected off its surface like a mirror. She stopped for a moment and stared at it. She didn't touch it. She never touched things she wasn't supposed to, but her fingers twitched slightly, almost like they remembered something. Then she turned and went back to work. As the morning went on, the planner arrived, followed by decorators, florists, and finally the early guests. The place slowly filled with chatter and laughter. People dressed in bright colors walked in and out of the hall, adjusting clothes, greeting relatives, or just trying to find their seats. The planner moved around quickly, giving directions to every staff member she could find. She was stressed, which wasn't unusual. Weddings came with pressure. Everything had to be perfect. But by the time the ceremony ended and the guests began moving into the reception hall, something felt off. The planner checked her notes again and again. She whispered to one of the servers, who shook his head. She made a quick call, then another, then another. Her expression grew more worried each time. The staff tried not to stare, but they all felt the tension. The planner approached the table where the young server was stacking plates. She asked softly if she had seen anyone sitting at the piano. The server shook her head. She hadn't seen anyone near it except for a few kids who ran past it earlier. The planner sighed and walked off quickly. Moments later, she returned, almost out of breath, and muttered to the staff that the hired pianist was stuck in traffic miles away. There was no way he would make it in time. The reception was about to start, and the couple had chosen live piano music for their entrance. Without it, the energy of the moment might fall flat. Guests expected elegance, and silence wasn't going to help. Someone from the staff half-joked. "Maybe she can play," pointing toward the quiet young server. It was said in a playful tone, not meant to be taken seriously. But the planner turned around quickly, almost desperately. She looked at the young woman's hands, then at her face, and asked, "Can you play? Even something simple?" The young woman froze. Her heart beat a little faster. She didn't know whether to laugh or pretend she didn't understand the question. She hadn't expected anyone to ask her something like that. She felt suddenly exposed, like someone had opened a door she always kept shut. Most of the staff chuckled and assumed the planner was joking. But she wasn't. She needed a solution. Any solution? The planner stepped closer and lowered her voice. "I'm serious. Do you know how to play even a little? Just enough to make the room feel warmer for the entrance?" The server hesitated. Part of her wanted to say no and walk away. She didn't want attention. She didn't want people staring. She didn't want to risk making a mistake in front of so many strangers. But another part of her, a small part she usually kept hidden, felt a spark inside. She hadn't played in years, not properly. Life had gotten in the way. Work, bills, responsibilities, there was no room for music anymore. But the piano still lived somewhere in her memory. Buried under everything else, she swallowed and answered quietly, "I can play a little." The planner's face lit up with relief, even though she couldn't help wondering what a little meant. But right now, they had no other option. She thanked the young woman repeatedly, almost too fast to follow, and said she would guide her on what to do. Several staff members stopped what they were doing and turned to watch as the young woman was led across the room. The guests didn't notice yet. They were too busy chatting, taking pictures, or finding their seats. But the moment she reached the piano, a few people glanced over. They didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was moving it. Maybe she was adjusting the bench. No one expected a server to sit down and play. She looked at the piano keys, her hands trembling slightly. She lifted the fallboard slowly, revealing the smooth white and black keys beneath. She sat down on the bench, but didn't touch anything yet. Her breathing was uneven. She felt like she was standing in two different worlds. The life she lived now and the life she once dreamed of. The planner leaned in and whispered, "Just something soft, something pretty. It doesn't need to be perfect. Just enough to fill the silence." The server nodded, still unsure. She wasn't afraid of the piano. She was afraid of the people. She was afraid of failing. She was afraid of standing out when she had spent years learning how to blend in. She placed one hand slowly on the keys. The first touch was cold, but familiar. Her fingers rested lightly, almost like they were testing a memory. She closed her eyes for a moment and let out a quiet breath. The room wasn't quiet yet. Guests still talked. Silverware clinked softly. Children laughed as they ran between tables. But around her, everything felt still. She played one note. It echoed softly through the speakers. No one noticed. She played another, then a third. Her fingers moved hesitantly at first, unsure of what direction to take. She didn't have sheet music. She didn't have a plan. She just wanted to make something gentle. A few guests turned toward the sound. One of them whispered, surprised, "Is that the server?" Another shrugged, not paying much attention yet. She continued, letting her hands move in small patterns she remembered from long ago. The melody was simple, almost like a lullaby. Her nerves made her hand shake, but she kept going. Then she made a small mistake, a single wrong note. She froze for half a second. Her heart felt like it dropped. She could walk away right now. She could pretend it was nothing. She could say she tried and leave it at that, but she didn't. Her fingers moved again, this time with a bit more courage. She shifted the tune into something smoother. Her hands felt lighter, warmer, more sure of themselves. She didn't realize she was smiling a little. More guests turned to look. Not because she was loud, but because the music didn't sound like a beginner's. It sounded calm and thoughtful. Something that didn't match the nervous posture of the woman playing it. One of the older guests leaned toward his wife and whispered, "She's better than the pianist we had for my daughter's wedding." Another person lifted their phone. Recording quietly, the planner watched from across the room with a mix of amazement and relief. She hadn't expected this. Not from someone who worked so quietly in the background, but she could sense something unusual in the way the young woman played. It didn't sound like a rushed emergency fix. It sounded like something coming from the heart. The melody grew a little stronger, still gentle, but more confident. People began lowering their voices. The room didn't go silent yet, but the energy started to shift. The music was drawing people in. And for the first time that day, the young woman forgot about her apron, her job, the bills waiting at home, and the long hours ahead. For a brief moment, she wasn't a server. She wasn't someone blending into the background. She was someone who played the piano. She didn't know what would happen next. She didn't know if anyone cared. She didn't know if she would ever play in front of strangers again after this day. All she knew was that the music was alive in her again. And even if it lasted only a few minutes, it felt real, more real than anything she had felt in a long time. She kept playing, unaware that the small sound she created would become the first step toward something far bigger than she imagined. The sound of her playing began to travel across the hall slowly, like a soft wave that people didn't notice at first. She kept her eyes on the keys, barely daring to look up. She didn't want to see the crowd. She didn't want to know who was watching or how many were whispering. She just wanted to hold on to the fragile rhythm she was creating. Her hands felt warm now, steadier than before, guided more by memory than fear. The melody grew a little fuller, carrying gentle rises and falls. It wasn't a song people recognized. Yet it felt familiar, like something that belonged to quiet moments or warm afternoons. More guests turned their heads, confused for a second, and then curious. Many had attended dozens of weddings, but few had seen a server walk to a piano and start playing. A group of guests near the front table leaned toward each other and whispered. One of them said softly, "Is she the musician?" Another shook his head. "No, I saw her earlier bringing in plates from the kitchen." Their expressions changed from confusion to mild surprise. A few guests near the back decided to stand and get a better look. The planner, now calmer than before, stood off to the side watching the young woman with a look that mixed relief and disbelief. She checked her notes again, only out of habit, but it didn't matter now. The wedding may not have had the original musician, but this unexpected moment was working better than she could have hoped. The young woman, still unaware of how many eyes were on her, let her fingers glide through another soft passage. She didn't think about impressing anyone. She didn't think about being perfect. For the first time in a long while, she was simply letting the music speak on its own. She used to play like this when she was younger, when the world felt gentler, and she still had time to dream. The piano had been her escape back then. Now, it felt like it was waking something inside her again. A child wandered near the piano, holding a small plate of fruit. He watched her closely, fascinated by the moving fingers. She noticed him from the corner of her eye and gave a tiny smile without stopping the melody. The child smiled back, then tugged on his mother's hand to show her. The mother paused, listened, and whispered softly, "She's really good." Soon a couple more people gathered around, forming an unplanned half-circle. Some of the guests who had been loud earlier became strangely quiet. People seated near the back lowered their voices until their conversations faded into gentle murmurs. Slowly, the entire hall began to settle. It didn't turn silent all at once. It was more like someone slowly dimming a light. A moment ago, the place was full of clinking plates, laughter, and lively chatter. Now, the soft music pushed everything else aside. The young woman felt her nerves mixing with a strange sense of calm. She didn't think she was playing anything special, just something simple enough to not mess up. But even simple songs have power when played with feeling. Her fingertips moved as if they knew exactly what emotion she wanted to share, a small blend of nostalgia, warmth, and gentleness. A few older guests began recording without making it obvious. They lifted their phones slowly, trying not to disturb her. One of them whispered to a friend, "Look at her hands. She's been trained. You don't play like that without practice." Hell. His friend nodded quietly, watching her with interest. The planner noticed too. She walked over to the young woman after a minute, not wanting to interrupt but wanting to check in. She crouched slightly near the bench and asked in a whisper, "Are you okay? Do you need anything?" The server nodded quickly without stopping the music. "I'm fine," she whispered back. Her voice was calm but focused. The planner gave a small smile and stepped away again, relieved and grateful. As the melody reached a soft pause, the young woman let her foot lift from the pedal. She wasn't sure what to play next. Should she continue? Should she stop? She still didn't look up, afraid of what she might see. For all she knew, people were only pretending to care. Maybe they were tired of listening. Maybe they were annoyed. She didn't want to push her luck, but before she could decide, someone near the front began clapping. Then another person joined. Then another. Soon, a gentle wave of applause filled the hall. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was warm, appreciative, and surprised. It made her lift her head for the first time since she sat down. Dozens of eyes were staring at her. But they weren't judging. They weren't mocking. They weren't impatient. They were smiling. They were curious. Some were impressed. She felt her breath catch in her throat. She didn't expect applause. She didn't expect anything at all. A woman near the front table called out softly, "That was lovely." Her tone was sincere, not exaggerated. The server blinked, unsure how to react. She gave a small nod, lowering her gaze again. She knew she had to return to her regular duties. But the planner hurried over again. "That was beautiful," the planner whispered. "Can you keep playing just a little longer? The couple's entrance is in a few minutes." Your music is helping set the mood." The young woman hesitated only for a moment. She didn't mind helping, but she didn't want to overstep. Still, seeing the encouraging looks around her, she nodded and adjusted the bench slightly. She placed her hands back on the keys, choosing a new melody, one slightly more uplifting, but still gentle. This time, she played with more confidence. The first notes rang clear, floating across the hall as if they belonged there all along. More guests drifted closer. Some stood quietly. Others took their seats but turned their chairs to face her. A few people whispered to each other, wondering where she had learned to play. Many assumed she must have gone to a music school or had expensive lessons. No one guessed the truth that her lessons came from old books, borrowed instruments, and hours of practice alone in a dim living room after long shifts. She didn't play for attention. She played because the piano felt like home as the music flowed. The bride and groom entered the hall through a side door, unseen by most guests. They were preparing for their official entrance, adjusting clothes and fixing last-minute details. The bride paused when she heard the piano. She lifted the edge of the curtain slightly and whispered, "Who's playing?" Her friend, who stood beside her, answered, "It's one of the servers." They said the musician didn't show up. The bride looked puzzled. A server is playing like that? She kept listening for a moment, her expression softening. She's really talented. The groom peeked over as well, nodding in agreement. "She's better than the one we hired," he whispered with a small smile. Behind them, the photographer began snapping pictures, capturing the glow on the couple's faces as they listened. It wasn't the planned moment, but it felt genuine, unscripted, and beautiful in its own way. Out in the hall, the young woman continued playing. Unaware, she had drawn the attention of the bride and groom. Her fingers moved through gentle chords, weaving together sounds she didn't even know she remembered. It felt natural, like breathing. The planner motioned to the DJ, who switched off the background speakers entirely, letting her music fill the room without interruption. The atmosphere transformed into something peaceful and elegant. Guests felt it too, the shift in mood, the unexpected grace, the quiet emotion. Some said later that it was the first time they truly felt the beauty of the wedding. When she reached another soft pause, she looked up again and saw even more people watching. But instead of nerves returning, she felt something different. A quiet sense of pride. Not because she was showing off, but because she was sharing something she kept hidden for years. The bride and groom stepped out from behind the curtain at last, ready for their entrance. The guests rose, encouraged by the planner's subtle gesture. The young woman straightened on the bench, unsure if she should keep playing or stop. The planner signaled gently with her hand, "Keep going," so she did. She shifted into a slightly brighter melody, one that carried a hopeful, warm feeling. It wasn't a wedding march. It was softer, more personal. The kind of music that feels like it's guiding someone gently forward. The couple walked through the room holding hands, smiling as they passed the tables. Guests clapped and cheered. Some had tears in their eyes. The music added something real to the moment, something not rehearsed, not forced, not part of a plan. Something human as the couple approached her. The bride placed a hand on her shoulder for just a moment, whispering a quiet thank you as she passed. The young woman's breath caught. She nodded quickly, too nervous to speak. The melody continued until the couple reached their seats. Only then did she let her hands slow, transitioning to a soft ending. The final notes faded into the air like a gentle sigh. When the sound settled, the entire hall filled with applause again, louder this time. Her face warmed with embarrassment and gratitude as she stood slowly from the bench. She didn't bow. She didn't wave. She simply gave a small smile and stepped away, ready to return to her duties. But as she walked back toward the kitchen, several guests reached out to speak to her just a few words, a compliment, a kind gesture. She nodded politely, still overwhelmed. She didn't know that more people had recorded her. She didn't know that some had already posted the videos online. She didn't know how quickly those videos would spread. All she knew was that, for a brief moment, she had forgotten the weight of her everyday life. She had played again. She had shared a part of herself she thought she had buried long ago, and now, without realizing it, Her life had begun to shift in a direction she never saw coming, after she stepped away from the piano and returned to her usual duties. She tried to blend back into the flow of the reception. She picked up empty glasses, replaced napkins, and carried trays of food from the kitchen to the tables. She moved quietly, hoping the attention on her would fade. She didn't want anyone staring or asking questions. She wanted to go back to being someone in the background, but the moment she re-entered the main hall with a tray of drinks, she realized things had changed. People looked at her differently now. Not in a rude or uncomfortable way, just with curiosity, with interest. With something like admiration she wasn't used to receiving. She could feel their eyes following her movements. Every time she walked past a table, someone whispered something to the person sitting next to them. She kept her head down and focused on her work. She told herself it would all pass in a few minutes. But it didn't. A woman in a blue dress approached her gently near the dessert table. She wasn't loud or pushy. She just smiled and said, "You played beautifully earlier. I didn't know someone could make a room feel that calm with just a piano." The young woman thanked her softly, not sure what else to say. Compliments always felt strange to her, especially ones she didn't expect. Another guest, an older gentleman with silver hair, tapped her shoulder lightly when she passed his table. "You have a rare touch," he said. "My wife plays, and she could tell right away you didn't learn from ordinary lessons. You play with feeling. It's not something you can teach." She nodded politely again, unsure how to respond. She didn't want to talk about her past, or how she had learned to play alone, or why she stopped. The memories were good and painful at the same time, so she simply smiled and moved on. More people gathered in small groups, watching videos on their phones. She didn't realize the videos were of her, recorded only minutes earlier. A few guests were already showing them to their relatives sitting at other tables. Some were replaying the parts where her hands moved effortlessly. Others were replaying the quiet moment when the room fell silent around her, in another corner. A teenager whispered to his brother, "It's already got hundreds of views." "Look," he tilted his phone, showing the expanding numbers on the screen. The brother widened his eyes and whispered back, "That's crazy. And it's not even posted by someone famous." She had no idea any of this was happening. She was busy refilling drinks and directing guests toward the cake-cutting area. Every now and then she heard someone say, "Is that her?" followed by a quick hush when she walked past. The planner found her near the kitchen door and stopped her gently. "You're doing great. Thank you again for helping earlier." "I don't know what we would have done without you." "It was nothing," the young woman answered quietly. "I just played a little." The planner shook her head. "No, it wasn't just a little. You changed the whole feel of the room. Everyone's been talking about it." The young woman didn't know what to say. Praise made her uncomfortable. She wasn't used to anyone noticing her work, let alone her music. She wanted to shrug it off, but the planner seemed genuinely grateful. She simply nodded and continued with her tasks. A few minutes later, the bride approached her. She walked slowly, her dress trailing behind her like a cloud. And she stopped right in front of the young woman with a gentle smile. "I didn't get to thank you properly," the bride said softly. "Earlier, during our entrance, your music made the moment feel almost magical. It felt like a movie scene. We weren't expecting something like that. You helped us more than you know." The young woman lowered her gaze. "I'm glad it helped. I just didn't want the room to feel empty." "It didn't," the bride said warmly. "It felt alive." The groom joined them with a friendly nod and added, "You saved the planner from a meltdown. And you made our entrance better than the one we planned." "Thank you." She felt her cheeks warm. She wasn't used to being the center of attention like this, especially from people she was supposed to be serving. She thanked them softly and stepped back, trying to stay respectful and professional. Later in the evening, while carrying a tray of appetizers, she overheard a group of guests talking. She must be some kind of music student. "Oh. Someone said she works full-time here. It can't be right. Did you hear that melody? She plays better than some professionals. But why would someone with that kind of talent be working as a server? I don't know. Maybe life doesn't always go as planned." She knew they weren't trying to be rude. They were just confused. People often assume talent always leads to opportunity. They rarely think about the barriers, the responsibilities, the sacrifices, the realities of survival. She put down the tray and returned to the kitchen for more. A coworker followed her inside and whispered excitedly, "People are obsessed with your playing. You should see the videos. They're everywhere." She shook her head quickly. "Please don't show me. I don't want to look." The coworker laughed but didn't push. "You're going viral. I promise. I've never seen anything spread this fast." Viral. The word didn't feel real to her. Things like that happened to other people who wanted attention. People who posted videos every day. People who hoped for fame. She wasn't one of them. She didn't even take pictures of herself often. She didn't own a fancy phone. She didn't want to be known. She spent the next hour staying busy. The busier she stayed, the less she had to think. The hall grew louder as the night continued. Guests danced, talked, and laughed. The music from the speakers replaced her piano, filling the room with upbeat rhythms. Kids chased each other around the tables. Couples spun across the floor. The atmosphere had changed again, from quiet elegance to joyful celebration. But even with the lively noise, a few guests still came up to her. One woman said, "You should perform somewhere." "You have real talent," another said. "My cousin works with musicians. If you ever want connections, I can give you her number." Someone else insisted, "You must record something. People would love it." She listened politely, but inside she felt overwhelmed. She didn't want to disappoint them, but she didn't know what to do with all this attention. Music had always been private for her, something she held close, something she kept hidden when life grew heavy. It didn't feel like something to show off. The night continued, and eventually it was time to clear the tables. Guests began leaving slowly, still talking about the wedding, the food, the dancing, and surprisingly, the unexpected piano performance. She heard fragments of conversations as she collected empty plates. That girl at the piano. What a surprise. It was the most peaceful moment of the whole night. I hope she keeps playing. She deserves recognition. The young woman kept her expression calm, but each comment made her heart beat a little faster. She didn't want to believe any of it. Compliments fade. Attention fades. People move on. She had learned not to depend on moments like these, but even if she tried to deny it, the feeling inside her was real. She felt alive again. She felt connected to something she had lost for years. She felt the old version of herself, one who used to dream of music, not fear it trying to come back. After the last guest left, the staff stayed behind to clean. The room slowly returned to its original quiet state. The candles were blown out, flowers rested on their sides, and the piano stood untouched again. She paused for a moment as she passed it on her way to gather more plates. She placed a hand gently on the polished surface, not to open it again, not to play, just to feel it. It felt warm under her palm, as if holding the memory of the music she played earlier. "You did something special tonight," one of her coworkers said from behind her. She turned slightly, surprised. He added, "Not everyone can make a whole room stop and listen. Not everyone can bring that kind of emotion." She shrugged softly. It was just for a moment. Sometimes, he said, one moment is enough to change everything. She didn't answer. She didn't know how. When the cleanup ended and the staff prepared to clock out, she checked her phone for the first time all day. She expected messages from her mother or a friend asking how her shift was going. Instead, she saw notifications piling up from people she didn't know. Messages from strangers, tags, comments, shares. She clicked one without thinking, and there she was, sitting at the piano, playing the soft melody from earlier. The video had already traveled far, reaching thousands of people she had never met. The comments were filled with warm words. "This is beautiful. Plays with so much emotion. I could listen to this all day." Someone. Give her a platform. I wish I knew who she was. She stared at the screen in silence. Her chest felt tight, but not in a painful way. More like in a way she couldn't fully understand yet. She didn't expect any of this. She didn't know what it meant. She didn't know what would happen next. All she knew was that the world had hurt her, not the parts of her she tried to hide. Not the tired server who blended into the background, But the part of her that had once dreamed of music, and now, whether she was ready or not, that part of her was waking up again. The moment the bride asked if she could play again, left her standing there, unsure of what to say. She had already played once, and the whole room had heard her. The thought of going back to the piano, with everyone now knowing who she was and what she could do, made her heart race. But the bride's eyes were warm, full of encouragement, and the guests around them waited quietly, almost holding their breath, as if they already knew she would say yes. She finally nodded. It was a small nod, almost too soft to notice, but the bride caught it and smiled. A few guests clapped lightly, not loud or demanding, just supportive. As she walked back toward the piano, she felt different from before. Earlier, she had been invisible, just someone moving between tables with drinks and plates. Now she felt seen, truly seen in a way she hadn't expected. The wedding hall had a way of amplifying every sound. Her footsteps seemed louder, and the soft chatter in the room faded as she reached the piano. The lid was still open from her earlier performance, and the chair sat exactly where she had left it. She ran her fingers gently across the keys, testing the feeling. They were cool against her skin, but familiar in a way that comforted her. She sat down, took a slow breath, and let the room settle. People were watching, but it didn't feel heavy this time. It felt like they were listening before she even began. Giving her space to shape the moment rather than expecting her to impress them, she chose a different piece this time, something slower, deeper, and emotional. She didn't announce it or look up. She just lowered her shoulders, relaxed her hands, and began to play. The first notes were quiet, almost fragile, like a whisper in a big room, but they carried, floating across the space and reaching every corner. The melody felt like a story people didn't need words to understand. It rose gently, then fell like a breath being released after years of holding on. Her hands moved with a softness she hadn't shown in a long time, and the music came out warm, full of color and emotion she hadn't known how to express in conversation. As she played, she forgot the guests. She forgot the wedding, the long shifts, the tight schedule, and the tired feet she had walked in with. She only felt the piano beneath her hands and the deep, steady rhythm inside her own chest. Every time she pressed a key, she let out something she had held inside for years, doubts. Memories, moments she never said out loud. The guests listened in complete silence. Even the children at the back, who earlier had been running around, now stood beside their parents, leaning against their legs, watching as if this moment belonged to everyone. The bride and groom held hands, their heads tilted slightly as they listened. The photographers slowly lowered their cameras. The servers who had been carrying trays earlier gathered near the side wall, their eyes wide in surprise because they had never seen this side of her. Halfway through the piece, the music swelled, rising like sunlight breaking through clouds. She leaned slightly into the keys, letting the notes grow stronger. It felt like she was telling the room that she wasn't afraid to be heard anymore tonight. Some guests wiped tears from their eyes. The groom's mother pressed a hand against her heart. The bride whispered something softly, though her voice didn't carry across the room. Whatever she said, it looked like gratitude, admiration, maybe a little disbelief. When the last note finally faded into silence, she didn't move for a few seconds. Her hands hovered over the keys as if they didn't want to leave. She felt calm, warm, almost weightless. She slowly lowered her hands to her lap, breathed out, and looked up. Everyone stood. She didn't hear the clapping right away. She saw their faces first, smiling, emotional, grateful. Then the applause hit her like a wave. It wasn't the loud, polite clapping people do to be polite. It was real strong, long, and full of appreciation. She covered her mouth with her hand, not sure how to take it. She wasn't used to people looking at her this way. Guests stepped closer to the piano, still clapping. Some raised phones, but not to record her playing. They were capturing the moment after. The moment where she looked like she was seeing her own future for the first time. A woman wearing a dark green dress walked up to her first. She introduced herself as someone who worked for a music company. Though in the noise of the applause, it was hard to hear exactly which one. The woman praised her talent, saying she had a rare gift and a natural way of telling stories through music. She asked if she had ever thought about performing more publicly. She didn't know what to say. She had thought about it, but life had always been too busy, too demanding, too unpredictable. Bills needed to be paid, and dreams didn't always fit neatly into schedules. But hearing someone say it out loud made her wonder if she had been underestimating herself all along. Another guest came forward, asking if she had any recordings online. Someone else asked if she taught piano lessons. A man wearing a suit told her that her playing had reminded him of a musician he once heard overseas. He didn't compare her to big stars or famous concert players. He simply said she had something different, something personal. The servers she worked with came closer too. They didn't interrupt or try to ask questions right away. They just smiled proudly, like they were seeing a friend step into a new chapter. One of them whispered that they always knew she was kind and hardworking, but they had never imagined she carried something so beautiful inside her. The bride approached last. She didn't rush. She just walked quietly and waited until the others stepped aside. When they were finally face to face, the bride held both her hands gently and said, "Thank you, not for saving money, not for being a good server, but for giving the wedding a moment people would remember for the rest of their lives." No one had ever said anything like that to her before. She felt her eyes sting with emotion, and she looked down, not wanting to cry in front of everyone. But the bride squeezed her hands and said it again, softer this time. She felt something inside her shift. After a while, the crowd began to return to their tables. The music started again from the speakers, soft and warm. People talked about her performance as they ate dessert. Some laughed in amazement. Others shook their heads like they were still trying to understand how a simple request had turned into something so incredible. She stayed near the piano for a few minutes. Not because she was unsure where to go, but because she wanted to hold on to the feeling. It was rare, delicate, and deeply meaningful. She knew she would go back to her shift soon. She still had work to finish, but before she did, she allowed herself one more moment to breathe and let the night sink in. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know, was how quickly this moment would travel beyond the room. Guests had recorded her performance. Videos were already being shared, commented on, and passed from phone to phone, even before desert plates were cleared. Her playing was spreading across the internet, but she remained unaware of all this. She only knew that tonight felt different. She only knew that something inside her had come alive again, and she had no idea what the next day would bring. She woke up the next morning with the faint sound of rain tapping against the window. For a moment, she forgot everything that had happened the night before. Her mind still felt foggy from the long shift. Her body ached from hours of walking and carrying trays. But then she checked her phone out of habit, and her eyes widened. There were messages, hundreds of them. Notifications from apps she usually ignored were lighting up her screen. Missed calls, unknown numbers, texts from coworkers. Even her older cousin, who rarely contacted her unless it was something important, had sent her a long message asking if she was awake. She opened one message at random. It was from a coworker who had been at the wedding. They were shouting through text saying things like, "Have you seen it yet? And you're all over the internet. And you need to wake up." She frowned, confused. Then she opened the next message and saw a link. A video. She clicked it without thinking. When the video opened, she felt her breath catch. It was her, sitting at the wedding piano, her hands moving across the keys. The crowd listening. Someone had filmed her full performance, and from the angle it seemed like it had been taken from the far side of the room. The sound was clear, and the piano echoed beautifully. She watched herself, unsure how to feel. It didn't seem like she was watching her own life. It felt like she was watching someone she didn't know, someone braver, freer, and more confident than she had ever allowed herself to believe she could be. She scrolled. Down to the comments there were thousands. People were saying they had never seen someone play with so much emotion at a wedding. Others wrote that they had to stop what they were doing because they couldn't look away. Some talked about their own dreams they had put aside. Others asked who she was and whether she had more videos online. A few comments simply said the music had made them cry. She sat back on her bed, stunned. Her room was quiet, except for the rain and her own breathing. She held her phone tightly, so if it might slip from her hands. Another link appeared, a different angle of the same performance. Then another. Soon, she realized the guest had shared multiple videos, and all of them were spreading fast. Some clips already had millions of views. The numbers kept rising every few minutes. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from something she couldn't name. It felt unreal. Her phone buzzed again. It was her manager from the restaurant. She hesitated before answering. She wondered if she had done something wrong, maybe by stepping away from her duties at the wedding, even though the bride had asked her. But as soon as she heard her manager's voice, she relaxed a little. He wasn't calling to scold her. He was calling because the restaurant's phone wouldn't stop ringing. People wanted to know when she would be working next. They wanted to make reservations just so they could meet the girl who played the piano at the wedding. Some people even asked if the restaurant could allow her to play for guests while they ate. She laughed nervously, saying that she wasn't a hired musician. She was just a server. Her manager chuckled too, but he said she might have to get used to the attention. She had no idea what to think. She spent the next hour answering messages, but she couldn't get through all of them. Every time she replied to one comment, 10 more appeared. People from different countries were sharing her video. Some wanted to send her gifts. Others shared their own stories of forgotten dreams. It was overwhelming, yet oddly comforting. Around noon, she received a call from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something told her to answer. When she picked up, a warm, clear voice introduced herself as someone from a music program she had admired years ago. They had seen her video. They said her playing had caught their attention. They asked if she would like to come in for an informal meeting, not an audition. It's just a chance to talk. She couldn't speak at first. The voice on the phone waited patiently. When she finally managed to say yes, the woman on the other end sounded genuinely happy. After the call, she set her phone down and pressed her hands against her face. She wasn't crying, but her eyes felt warm. Everything was moving so fast that she wasn't sure what her life even was anymore. Her cousin called next, yelling excitedly, saying he had shown the video to his friends and they didn't believe it was someone from their own family. Her aunt sent a voice message full of emotional words. Even people she hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly reaching out, telling her how proud they were. By the afternoon, she needed a break. She put her phone on silent and stepped outside. The rain had slowed, turning into a soft mist. The air smelled fresh. She walked to a small park down the street and sat on a bench beneath a leafy tree. It was quiet there. She watched the wet leaves drip and the birds hop along the branches. She closed her eyes and tried to think. She wasn't famous. She didn't want to be. That wasn't the dream. All she ever wanted was a chance to play without fear, without bills blocking the way, without the feeling that her talent was something she had to hide. But watching her videos and reading the comments felt like a door had opened. Not a big flashy door, but a small, simple one that had been locked for years. Now it was unlocked. All she had to do was decide whether to walk through it. That thought alone made. Her heart beat fast. She stayed at the park for almost an hour. When she finally walked back home, she felt calmer. She knew she didn't have to make big decisions immediately. She only needed to take one step at a time. When evening came, she returned to her phone. Another wave of notifications waited for her. Someone had found an old video of her playing at a school event from years ago, and that video was now spreading too. She felt embarrassed at first. She remembered how nervous she had been then, but the comments were kind. People saw something in her that she had never allowed herself to see. Later that night, the bride from the wedding texted her. She said she was still amazed by what had happened. She thanked her again for making their wedding unforgettable. She also said that her friends were all talking about how meaningful the performance had felt. Some even said it was the most beautiful part of the entire celebration. The bride ended the message by telling her that whatever she chose to do next, she deserved it. She read that message twice. When she finally lay down to sleep, she replayed everything in her head the moment she touched the piano for the first time at the wedding. The silence in the room, the applause, the faces of the guests, and the unexpected wave of kindness that followed. She remembered how small she had felt walking into that job, thinking it was just another shift, another long night. She had no idea her life would change because someone asked her to play just one song. Before closing her eyes, she whispered to herself that maybe this time she wouldn't let the opportunity slip away. Maybe she would follow the path opening in front of her, even if she had to walk slowly, carefully. One step at a time. Over the next weeks, things continued to unfold. She attended the meeting with the music program. They listened to her play again, this time in a quiet room with a real piano that felt heavy and alive under her hands. They told her she had natural talent, emotional, genuine. They said they could help her shape it into something stronger. She didn't want to quit her job right away. She arranged her schedule carefully, balancing work and music. Her life became busy, but it was a good kind of busy. A hopeful kind. People in her town began to recognize her. Not in a way that overwhelmed her, but in a way that made her feel like she belonged. Sometimes someone would smile at her in a grocery store and say they had watched her wedding performance at least 10 times. Others would ask if she had any new music coming soon. She never knew what to say except thank you. Every single time, she meant it. Months passed, and she grew slowly but steadily. She learned new pieces, practiced old ones, even wrote small melodies of her own. She posted short clips online, not for attention, but to share what she loved. And people listened. Not because she had gone viral, but because her music carried something real. She learned that recognition fades. Trends die out, and viral moments don't last forever, but the impact remains. Her life didn't become perfect, but it became meaningful in ways she hadn't imagined. One evening, she sat at her small keyboard in her room. Playing softly, the window opened beside her. The breeze carried the notes into the night. She paused for a moment and thought about the day at the wedding, the day she stopped being invisible to herself. She wasn't playing for a crowd now. She wasn't playing for the internet or for strangers. She was playing because she loved it. Because the piano had always been the one place where her heart spoke clearly. The viral videos had opened a door, but it was her courage that allowed her to step through it. As she finished the last note, she rested her hands on the keys and smiled gently to herself. Her life had changed, slowly and quietly. Not in a burst of fame, but in a steady unfolding of hope, and all of it had started with a simple moment, a piano at a wedding, a request she never expected, a song she wasn't afraid to share, and a courage she didn't know she hadn't till the world helped her see it.